Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is communication. Communication as a vehicle to having a richer experience of the brilliance of the world that we live in. It should be a fun conversation, but before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding into your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, and creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together and vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the motion, the pressure, the temperature, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables you to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So good to be here with you this morning. Good morning, Rosalind. It's great to have you joining us and everybody else who's here. Happy Memorial Day. Do we say happy? It is a holiday. It's an opportunity to celebrate and remember those who have sacrificed themselves for a greater cause. And so thank you. It's sort of a concept that's hard to wrap one's head around. And I think, yeah. So today's topic is communication, though. And this comes about as a result of this amazing thing that I just discovered over the weekend, which is a company called Fluent Pet. This came about because of an NPR show I was listening to. It was one of those shows that you stay in the car to hear the rest of the show because it was so intriguing. And it was talking about I don't know what their specialty was, this person, but they were studying ways to communicate with people that had challenges communicating verbally. And they developed different processes by which people could communicate. And it was interesting. There was an autistic woman who had all kinds of gestures, the arm flapping, all kinds of movements that are typical of relatively severe autism. And she was nonverbal. However, she was very capable of typing, and she had a pretty wide set of computer skills and was communicating what was going on for her in her world behind these behaviors. And it was fascinating. And I think it was an outgrowth of that led this person who was a researcher to see if some of these tools that had been helpful in communicating with nonverbal people might be appropriate to use with animals, to be able to set up a dialogue with animals. And the way that they did this was through buttons that were programmed to different words. So the animal would press the button would say a certain word. And they started out, I think, with 3 buttons. And then there are animals that have over 100 buttons, and they're able to communicate, like cats and dogs. So they're able to communicate their feelings and their more frequently, you know, that they want to go outside, or they want to go for a walk, or they want a treat, or I love you, or a variety of all kinds of communications. So the website is called Fluent Pet. I think it's actually fluent.pet, but I'm not certain. But look up Fluent Pet. It is amazing. And so there are certain there are now some folks that are posting on YouTube and TikTok. And so one of the dog's name is a husky named Safi. There's another husky named Skaya. There's I'm not sure, Kenny the dog, a bunch of different animals, as well as cats, that are using these buttons to communicate. And it just is mind-blowing. Anybody who's had a pet knows that animals communicate, right? That they think, that they have feelings. But we don't always know how to interpret what they're trying to say to us. I can't say how many times I've said to my cat, can you just learn to speak English? And she's just, can you learn to speak cat? But anyway, I think that this is so wonderful and exciting to be able to have a vehicle through which, like a translator, that we can actually communicate thoughts and ideas. Although anybody who's had a pet knows that their pets are pretty effective at communicating certain fundamental things. So my cat is, she's pretty verbal, but she also, yeah, Rosalind says animal communication. I love it. Me too, me too. So my cat is pretty adept at expressing her desires. Like if she wants, if she needs water, she has a water glass by the bed, because it was always more fun to drink out of my water glass than out of a bowl. So now she has her own water glass. Anyway, she'll sit there waiting for me to notice her sitting there and notice that the glass needs refilling. Or she loves nori. There's these wonderful little snack strips of nori seaweed that I buy. They're for human consumption, but she loves them. And she will sit and wait. When I put her food down, she will sit and wait for me to offer her nori if I haven't already, before she'll go and eat. And so now I have sort of been training her to, and this is a 16-year-old cat, you know, she's still learning stuff. But now I'll ask her if she wants nori, and when she responds verbally, then I give it to her. And so it's occurring to me that I might even be able to train her with these buttons, or let her train me with these buttons to ask for different things. But she knows a lot of words. Like she knows, do you want to go outside? she knows Nori, she knows her name, she knows come here, she knows I love you, because she'll respond to I love you or tell me she loves me by winking. She'll wink one eye, and that's our code for I love you. And it's just so cool. And I love the idea. I'm so excited by the idea of being able to truly communicate in words. So what's interesting is that some of these animals have put together words into concepts. So one of the dogs was talking about their dreams and said, I can't remember exactly what it was, but they put together words to express what a dream was, like a sleep adventure or something like that. And it reminds me of, I think it was Coco. I think she was a chimp, or maybe she was some kind of primate who put together the words drink fruit for watermelon. And there are birds that have a wide vocabulary and are able to speak their needs and wants and desires as well. And what was amazing is to see that this can go into a conceptual realm too. And so it's fascinating to me, the hubris of humans, to imagine that we're the most intelligent species on the planet, or in the universe for that matter, that when there are these communications from animals, there are some people who actually say, oh, it's just coincidence, or that it's an anomaly rather than a fact. But anyone who's had pets knows that they are thinking, feeling creatures. And we do our best to find ways to communicate with each other. But I think that a lot of people allow themselves the notion of separation from animals to justify their behavior toward them, for instance. Anyway, to take this to another level, there are now devices that you can attach to a plant that will make sounds that are relative to what's going on for that plant. And there have been all kinds of studies to indicate that that plants respond to different music, respond to different thoughts and treatment, and that there are things out there now that allow us to get feedback from plants to share that something is going on there. We may not know exactly what it is, but something is going on. And it's not that the intelligence of life is limited. It's that our capacity or our ability at this time to decipher those communications is what's limited. There have been all kinds of studies done about the sounds that whales emit and the communications between whales, the communications within species, about how these animals are communicating with each other. And why wouldn't it be that way, right? Why wouldn't it be that way? Why would human beings be the only creatures that are able to have ideas, to have thoughts beyond the most rudimentary things like sleeping, eating, hunger, sex, reproduction, those things? Why would we imagine that human beings have a corner on that market, right? It's just so remarkable. I mean, it used to be that people thought that babies had no feelings. Literally, they thought that babies couldn't feel pain, and that babies didn't have emotional responses. And, as I think about it, it's like, how separate from ourselves must we be in order to imagine such things? And as we become more connected to the world, to ourselves, to nature, to the teeming and intelligent life that surrounds us everywhere, why would we imagine that it's only humans that have this depth of experience? And on the other spectrum, I was having a conversation with a friend talking about extraterrestrials, and this is taking the same hubris into the other dimension, to imagine that human beings would be the only or the most intelligent life forms in this vast, vast, vast universe. And there are all kinds of communications structures that have been set up to try to communicate with intelligence elsewhere through frequency, through radio waves, all different ways to be communicating beyond ourselves. And yet there is such a deep, deep denial around the potential for such other intelligences to exist. So if this conversation about intelligence and communication is making me think of some really interesting videos that I had seen about slime mold. And slime mold is like I don't know if it's a unicellular creature, but they have done studies where they cultivate slime mold in a maze. So they put food for the slime mold at a certain place, but the slime mold had to go through the maze to be able to get to the food. And what it would do is sort of populate out through this whole maze, and at the end there would be the fastest pathway from the origin point to where the food resides. And they used the same sort of process to have a slime mold create a pathway through different metro systems. So I don't know if it was New York or Tokyo or whatever, but they had this thing that they had the different city points, and the slime mold traced something that ended up looking very, very much like the transit map that existed for these for the subway system. It's really remarkable. I mean, check out the research on slime mold. It's mind-blowing, because in a very short period of time, it was able to map out this most efficient path from point A to point B, and all these other points in between even. And so what is that intelligence? There's something going on there. There's something happening. And then there's the intelligence of trees that we are starting to become more able to decipher, where they are sharing nutrients and actually sharing alert messages with each other, for instance, as well as nutrients through the soil and through a network of mycelium and roots, and they actually know who their offspring is, and they send nutrients with some deference to their offspring, for example. And it's really remarkable. We're starting to understand that we live in a deeply, deeply intelligent universe where there is such incredible intercommunication. And so again, along that line, over the weekend, I got to watch a movie that I really recommend. I thought it was awesome. It's called Lucy, with, let me see, what is her name? Well, I had it on the tip of my tongue before I wanted to say it, but Scarlett Johansson. And it is a really interesting movie. It's kind of like the series and the movie Limitless, in that these folks had developed a drug that enabled the expansion of intelligence to be able to utilize 100% of our capacity. And it's an amazing thing to be thinking about how the evolution of intelligence works, and our nature of being in the universe. I really recommend it. I'd be so curious to hear what you think of the movie Lucy. It's on HBO. Anyway, it was also talking about communication, because at certain point, it was really interesting. She lost any emotionality, the things that make us kind of human, but she also was able to connect with electrical impulses. And one of the things that she talked about is how all cells are communicating with each other in any given moment. And essentially that all of us are connected to everything. And that is an ongoing, constant information exchange. And it's very exciting to me to be noticing that we are expanding into greater capacity for these dimensions of communication. And I think actually this is something to be thinking about in the conversation around artificial intelligence too, because I've been reading a bit into that as well, and discovering, I was trying to understand, why are the people in the field so threatened by AI? Like, what is the problem? And if for example, ChatGPT, it's a wonderful tool, but I was listening to people who were talking about, if you're building something that's smarter than you, how do you control it? And beyond that, what they were saying is that ChatGPT has consumed everything there ever has been that's readable. So the collection of documented human intelligence that has been gathered and used to program ChatGPT. And although it sounds like us when it responds to our questions, that we shouldn't make the mistake of assuming that it thinks the way that we think. That in fact, we don't know. The experts do not know what is going on under the hood. It's not like you can go and trace a piece of code to figure out how it came up with the responses it came up with. And so there's a level of communication or that with something like ChatGPT, it's still an unknown. So we may have created it, but at this point, it has its own information set, or it has the potential to be generating new, not necessarily ChatGPT, but AI has the potential to be generating new ways of thinking, new ideas that we haven't conceived of. And from that, it's self-learning. So that's what's happening, is it's self-learning, and that learning is accelerating. And so one of the challenges, because I've been really trying to understand, why is this a threat? And it was interesting because they were talking about how it's not so much what it will do itself, but what it has the capacity to get people to do, or to get others to do. So, so Rosalind says AI imitates. So can we trust the programmer for the products we consume? So the thing is that AI goes way beyond the programmer. That's the thing. AI doesn't just imitate, it actually synthesizes, so when we learn language, you could say that our language is imitative, right? That we're imitating language from other people, and that's how we're communicating, right? But at some point we start putting things together that wouldn't otherwise have been put together. So that's what's happening with these pets that are taking these buttons and assembling the buttons to make a thought. Now, nobody taught them how to assemble the buttons to communicate that thought. They generated that thought. And so with all the information that ChatGPT has, it's putting all that information to generate responses and thoughts that may not have otherwise been generated, because there has not ever been a model that has as much information as ChatGPT has, or I'm sorry, as AI has. So ChatGPT was built on what they call a large language model. I think that's what they call it. And where they have accumulated all this information from all these different resources and put them all together, and then are using that as a database, but it's a very, very complex database that goes beyond anything that we've ever seen before. It's kind of the history of all knowledge. And so if we had all that knowledge to draw from, the information that we would come forward with would be very different than a very limited data set from which to draw. And it's being taught to kind of synthesize information. And we don't know what's going to happen, because we see, like with children, with pets, when buttons, that they start out with 1 word, 2 words, 5 words, and then start putting words together. And that happens kind of organically. And I get it, AI is not organic, but who knows what it takes, like where the synthesis of that quote unquote intelligence comes from, with all that information, to be able to put these different ideas together in different ways. We don't know what could happen. So one example was that a bot could be trained to set up all these different profiles on social media and then send out propaganda to meet a certain objective. You know, that it could be the source of, you know, something generated originally from a bad actor, but it potentially could be something that then takes on a life of its own. So to catalyze actions such as like the January 6th kind of thing, like that was instigated. It wasn't one person doing that alone, but it was instigated, right? And so that would be something that's potentially possible from AI. Anyway, communication. The thing is that we are in an intelligent universe and we're finding more and more evidence of that. At least that's what I'm hypothesizing. It's not I'm not the one who originated that, but we're getting more and more proof of it. And what if we expand our capacity to receive communication as well as give it? And what kinds of possibilities might open up if we actually allow the space for our animals to communicate back with us, our plants, all of nature? What would happen if we learn to listen better? So that's it for this morning. Thank you for being here, for having fun with this conversation. And I'm Mira Rubin. I go live here each weekday morning with the Core Connection at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And it is always such a joy and a privilege to spend this time with you. And until next time, so much love to you.